started investigating the whole idea of Mars missions, which is impossible because of the radiation outside of our electromagnetic field. I was thinking about dry fasting, actually, because I wrote a book on dry fasting. And dry fasting might help, but you just can't irradiate the crew for 800 days. It just can't. There is no requirement in our biology for carbohydrates. And in fact, it looks more to me, the carbohydrates we eat are from the parasites that are asking for it, not us. It's our minds that developed from eating carnivore to have a huge mind that invented refrigeration and microscopes, which have led to a doubling of the lifespan from 40 to 80 years. So when you talk about life extension, you better be talking about health extension, because I don't think being over in a less and less functional body is the idea of life extension.
So today we've got with us Dr. Dunning with us, Dr. August Dunning. Welcome. Thanks for being here. I'm interested to chat with you. Can you just give us a little bit about your background for the people that aren't familiar with you?
Boy, there's a lot to it. One of the designers on the space station program, dealt with Dr. Bryant on astronaut health quite a bit, started investigating the whole idea of Mars missions, which is impossible because of the radiation outside of our electromagnetic field. Dropped that because I was thinking about dry fasting, actually, because I wrote a book on dry fasting. And dry fasting might help, but you just can't irradiate the crew for 800 days. It just can't. And so, yeah, I ended up getting held out, going back into college, doing some more things, kept learning more and more about health and physiology. I started at my dad's private library when I was 10, reading his books and not going to Little League. And it was just interesting because it is now, with my understanding of the human body, that we really have two big problems. And all these things led to this point where I could write a book on dry fasting for rapid healing and radical life extension, because dry fasting is completely different than any other form of fasting. We don't need to go into a lot of that, but what it does is it turns on stem cells safely to regenerate free for a 5 or 7 day dry fast, and that's cool. And I started really getting down to the nitty gritty of what life extension is really all about and challenges we have. And the one we're going to talk about today is this challenge we have of low bile iron storage management and copper deficiency management, because these two things are intimately related to the carnivore diet, because as red meat has plenty of zinc and beef liver has plenty of copper, and those two get together and make sure you have the antioxidants in your mitochondria. And if you don't have enough copper, then things go pretty bad. We can talk about that today. And I think I initially contacted you about ferroptosis, which is death by iron. And that has to do with food, which is why I prescribe a carnivore diet just to anybody with any medical problems.
I do want to talk this, but I do want to tap a little bit into your background with the space stuff, because you said it's impossible to colonize, to go to Mars. I have concerns. We're obviously investing a lot of money is going into this. Elon Musk making his reusable rockets. And is it just a fool's errand? Because I wonder if humans can even reproduce in say, a low gravity environment. I think part of our reproductive signaling is based on 1G gravity. And if we're in an environment that doesn't have that, we're not even sure if the embryonic cells can migrate in the right direction. I know they've done studies and a lot of the animals die. They never can reproduce in space. So I'm not sure how we get around that unless we can have these people live in these artificial gravity environments at enormous cost. I can't imagine what that would be just to have a sustainable life. But
trillions.
Yeah.
That's the fundamental issues here is, let's say we get there somehow. It turns out that 18 feet thickness of polyethylene, actually protect you from galactic cosmic rays, but who's going to build a spaceship or a colony with that kind of plastic? And the other issue, of course, is our circadian rhythm of our particular organism that's completely tuned to this gravity field and this day and night sequence and all that stuff. My big problem was when I was studying this, I was producing a presentation for the Observing the Frontiers conference back in 2019. I found that the prodromal effects of space travel, just the radiation effects, are so bad that you end up with sick astronauts months into the flight. Not to mention, if you have a major proton storm, which we had one in the outbound mission of, I think it was, I forget the spacecraft, but with that time, the number was so high, it was basically destroying every bone cells in the bone, and you had no red blood in 2 weeks. So you had dead astronauts arriving. That leads to the problems. There's no protection on Mars. There's no protection radiation. It doesn't have a magnetic field of any worth. There's some bubbles of stuff underneath the surface here and there, but it's a very dangerous planet. It's a very dangerous mission, and I doubt we'll ever get people there safely. I know if we have more problems fixed down here than going to Mars. And a lot of it is the food supply, the toxic biosphere we have. We don't face a climate crisis. We face a habitat crisis. And it's of our own doing, either by just expedience or ignorance.
Okay. Yeah. I'm like I said, I'm not planning on Star Trek. I know that's the fantasy is we're all going to be zipping around talking in our tricorders and landing on different planets. But I think I don't know. I don't think that'll ever happen. Well, certainly not in my lifetime for sure, so I'm not going to worry about it. But yeah, let's talk about like things that are actually things we have a real impact on. And so I want to discuss, you mentioned that dry fasting is like no other fasting. I see a lot of different fasting protocols, whether it's fat fasting or water fasting or name the food attached to it fasting. What do you think? Why do you say that? Why is it? Obviously, it's different because you're not consuming anything, not even liquid. But what is the big difference here?
Okay, let's talk about the biochemical changes that happen during a dry fast, because that is a significant difference. If you're water fasting, which I call a water diet, flushing out minerals, you have plenty of fluid in the bloodstream, so you have no decrease or increase rather in blood solids. But if you dry fast and you're not drinking any water, those blood solids rise, and it stimulates osmoreceptors on the hypothalamus to send signals to the pituitary to release antidiuretic hormone. Because you're eating all this water out, you got to stop it. And what it does is it goes into the bloodstream. ADH goes into the bloodstream, stimulates the adrenal medulla on top of the kidney to release, goes into the bloodstream, and starts cleaning triglycerides and fat cells for energy, because glycerol is needed. If you're not eating glucose after a couple of days, you run out all your glycogen. And you've got to be able to make plasma glucose for the blood and the brain. They absolutely require that. And so you're cleaning the triglycerides into glycerol and free fatty acids. The free fatty acids go into the liver, make ketones. They go to all the cells, make ATP, and you stay alive very well on that. Then what happens is really interesting, because when you go into ketosis, which is about they chew into it, you've run the glycogen in the muscle, you've run glycogen in the liver, and you've got to have new fuel source. Fly an airplane running out of gas. You better find some new gas soon. I like in water fasted, I'll just rip up the airplane to get the fuel. No, it doesn't work. Dry fasting, however, starts tapping the fat cells. And if you got enough fat to do a dry fast, and that is a critical issue, you can't be too skinny. You're still running on fat, just like a carnivore diet runs on fat, because you've got two systems in the mitochondria to work. You've got glucose, or glycogen, and free fatty acids from fat. And these two systems operate with the Randall cycle and all the other cycles most of us know about. And what that does is it turns out pKa, a digested enzyme. It actually drops it down to a level where pKa is normally used in your somatic cells for replication and also to protein manufacture and so forth. When that drops down, all that stops, because you want to protect that. You don't want rampant cellular replication during the day, because you end up with tumors and stuff. But at night, it's controlled, and these Wnt pathways, these protein signaling pathways, to where the stem cell population, which has a whole different chemistry, is able to start regenerating or replicating. As soon as they go into that, they go into their first replication and the transit amplifying phase, all the way to regenerative cells and differentiation. And what they found out was that dry fasting stimulates these very interesting stem cells in the fat. It's called mutacells. These cells are pluripotent. They can become all three germ lines. They go into your bloodstream on the third day of the fast. Out of your fat cells start flooding your vascular system and the vascular wall with these stem cells that can replace damage and do paracrine and juxtacrine signaling, all that kind of cool stuff. At the same time, your general stem cell population go into regeneration, and during the next 5 days in ketosis, you end up going through all the cycles, so about a day each, to get to differentiation, and you're plugging in brand new stem cells and brand new cells to replace the somatic loss. So what dry fasting adds to the party is that if you are eating carnivore, because that's what we're designed to eat, that's why we have these big craniums and full of fatty brains from 4 million years ago, you end up solving the other problem, because we had this iron management and a copper management problem, but we also have a somatic stem cell or somatic cell attrition rate. that it's just going to run out of cells at one point. Whether Hitler was right about 30 or Ray Pete was shown you can get it up to 90. And most of this kind of a bad number because some of your cells migrate, or some of your cells want to take like 10,000 times, like the gut cells from the crypts migrating up the villi into the epithelial wall to replace them all the time. So what dry fasting does is it's a very short period, like 5 to 7 days. It's a very short period that specifically tries to not go into gluconeogenesis. You don't want to grind up muscle and heart tissue to make ketogenic amino acids to make ketones. So it protects that. It regenerates stem cells and populates a whole new crop to taste stuff. It eliminates senescent cells because the weak cells get used up as food. And it also good for parasites, which is another big issue we can probably talk about some other time. But get all the parasites on the body, then you start being able to stick to diets because you're not getting wrong signals from the parasites to eat stuff you shouldn't be eating. When I analyzed water fasting, dry fasting, intermittent fasting, ketogenic diets, and all this stuff, it just seems that throwing with dry fasting in the mix kind of fixes a lot of stuff because it also dumps tons of toxins which are being sequestered in the fat cells, and you get rid of a big toxic load. Dry fasting is very interesting. I wrote a book called The Phoenix Protocol, and you go on Amazon and stuff. There's my plug. And it's a very interesting way to add something new into the mix to fight the paradox, the somatic paradox. If we only have our somatic cells to live off of, and we keep our stem cells asleep all the time because we never stop eating every day, because if you eat within 24 hours, that doesn't do anything for your stem cell population, unless you have traumatic error or catastrophic events that require them from the stress to all of a sudden activate to fix something. You can't activate stress over the body in that way to give a stem cell regeneration system wide. Dry fasting does that. The way I started presenting dry fasting, I also realized that this is an interesting tool to add to the toolbox for longevity.
So with dry fasting, you mentioned 3 to 5 days. Obviously, you can't do it indefinitely. There'll be some point where, you can't support that.
You actually eat your own cells. You don't want that. Yeah.
Yeah, I know there's reports of like very obese people that have fasted for months and months. Maybe it's not dry fasting, but water fasting. So clearly, if you're a normal sized human without a bunch of excess adipose tissue, this is only something you could do for a limited period of time. And it's interesting because you mentioned carnivore. Obviously, I'm a proponent of this carnivore. I've seen so many I can't even tell you how many amazing, incredible transformation I've seen with this. And I think it seems to be almost panacea-like in many ways for many issues. But what is you mentioned fat being important for the fuel, because there are people that will insist that glucose is our preferred fuel, and the human body without exogenous glucose or exogenous carbohydrate will have all kinds of issues. Do you ever what are your thoughts on those general criticisms?
There's a big argument on this. For instance, if you're going to be bodybuilding, really trying to do stuff, you may need some carbs just for energy. If you're just doing regular lifting and you're just doing enough to stress the muscle, to activate triggers, to have cell turnover, you just don't need it. It's true. Mitochondria work on two fuels. They work on glucose, they work on free fatty acids in the electron transport chain and the Krebs cycle. In that respect, yeah, mitochondria do love pure sugars. And every now and then in the morning, I'll drink some fresh squeezed grapefruit juice or maybe some orange wedges. It really goes in there real fast. It goes right to the membrane, right into the mechanisms, and makes a lot of ATP. It gives you a lot of energy. But that's not a necessary thing. There is no requirement in our biology for carbohydrates. And in fact, it looks more to me, the carbohydrates we eat are from the parasites that are asking for it, not us. And so, yeah, I totally agree with this. I think that the whole idea was, what a caveat, though. One thing I did learn from my friend Joe McCullough and the person he was interviewing called Georgie Dinkoff is that some things happen in the liver bound that are very important for that environment down there if you eat specific types of resistant starches to feed the bacteria down there to make short-chain fatty acids, which is acetate. So I can always say it's an interesting concept that every now and then I will add boiled baked potato, and it's got to be mashed potatoes into the diet for that, just to play with that, to see if it is useful. Some people, it doesn't cause any dysbiosis or anything. I think I'll agree with you that there is no metabolic reason to have carbohydrates. I think that we're probably eating them out of habit and out of the time when we were going from hunter-gatherers into agriculture, because what agriculture did, we can agree or not, I don't agree that it's good for the endothelial cells in the gut, is that it did give us food over periods where there was no food being grown. And so let's move the civilization in a way to have a little more people, to survive more and more of these seasonal variations. And that's how we got into, I think, the carb thing. And it's easy. But we damaged it even worse with Bullock and his wheat experiments back in the 60s, where now there's 9 times as much gliadin compared to ancient wheat in the modern wheat. And the gliadin is the thing that it screws up zonulin and the cells to open up the junctions to let stuff leak out of the gut into the bloodstream. So yeah, I have a problem with some carbohydrates.
Yeah, and I think you're not alone in that. I think there's a lot of people that ultimately discover that at some point in their life. You mentioned longevity, and anytime people talk about longevity, I get a little skeptical, just because I'm like, show me the money, show me the proof. Where's these 120-year-olds walking around? I'm yet to see robust evidence of someone whose protocol theory has panned out yet. It still seems that, although I do see more and more very fit looking people into their 80s and 90s, which I'm really encouraged by. But as of this point, I still tend to be skeptical on that. But what are your thoughts with regard to how, I guess, dry fasting maybe combined with a carnivore diet could be longevity inducing?
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. It's our mind to develop from eating carnivore to have a huge mind that invented refrigeration and microscopes, which have led to a doubling of the lifespan from 40 to 80 years. It's something we invented. Cool. We really do well with managing what's happening at the cellular level. And in that respect, we haven't really understood the time barriers, you want to call it that, the lifetime barrier of these mismanaged wars over copper and iron. Because if you have too much copper in the body, it starts affecting the mitochondria. The mitochondria require 50,000 ions of copper in every mitochondria to make the cytochrome C for the third and fourth step in the electron transfer chain, for making superoxide dismutase with zinc. So it's really critical. And if those levels go down and mitochondrial function starts going down and you get less ATP, then the heme groups don't know what to do. The iron cell cells don't know what to do. We end up with iron accumulation as mitoferrin or mitoferritin in the mitochondria, which floods into the cells and starts filling the cells with more labile iron. That's the problem. It's not that we couldn't figure this out. We just haven't managed the systems correctly to be able to change the filters in the car. If you drive a car, you don't do your oil filter, your air filter, there's going to be some significant problems up there over time. And this is what happens. Scientists, the hormone regulates iron metabolism in the reticular endoplasmic system, the liver. It's copper dependent. If copper is low, it doesn't do its job well. And maybe people don't realize you had about 25 billion cells in the blood cells in the body, of which 2.5 million have to replace every day, every 120 days, what their lifespan is. And it takes about 24 of the 25 milligrams of copper to do that. But there's some left over. And if you have copper deficiency, that starts being accumulated as ferritin and hemosiderin. Ferritin holds about, 4,500 ions, and hemosiderin holds, 45,000. And these things can then be released in conditions like ferroptosis, when polyunsaturated lipid overdose in cells lights a fire that goes into the Ferritin reaction, which releases all these hydroxyl radicals and all these Fe3 reactive iron ions, and it starts just eating everything up. It just starts destroying the lipid layers of the mitochondria, the cytosol, and all this stuff. So when we talk about longevity and lifespan, we have to really avoid the pitfalls of the Gaudatus Elos, who asked Zeus to get Pythaneus eternal life, but not requesting eternal youth either. So when you talk about life extension, you better be talking about health extension, because I don't think being over in a less and less functional body is the idea of life extension.
Yeah, the most of the 100-year-olds I had met in my career as an orthopedic surgeon were demented old ladies with broken hips in diapers that smelled of urine and were basically delirious. And so that's not, obviously, that no one wants that. But you mentioned hepcidin or hepcidin and its impact, it's how it's impacted by copper. But also my understanding is insulin actually has a pretty significant impact on hepcidin. Yeah. And if insulin is too high, then that is down regulated to the point that you don't properly absorb iron, or you overabsorb iron, one of the two.
Right, especially
yeah. So when you mentioned stress, a traumatic stress causing the necessity for stem cell release, how does exercise play a role in there? Because my baseline belief is exercise is good for us, and exercise is stressful. It can be, or in many ways, it should be. I don't know. What are your thoughts around exercise and this whole thing? Does it couple with dry fasting? Do you want to avoid it during dry? How do you roll exercise into the Phoenix protocol, if at all?
You reduce or eliminate anything other than walking during a dry fast, because there's just no energy to run the muscles to do that kind of work. I'm lucky enough to be partnered with someone who used to be married to Ray Metzer. She knows pretty much about bodybuilding and the heavy duty program and so forth. And what Ray and Mike understood, and also the guy that invented Nautilus, I forget his name now.
Arthur Jones.
Yes, Arthur Jones. Understands that muscle building is not about how many times you're going to lift. Muscle building is about reaching the trigger point. And the trigger point is when you almost can't lift enough weight, and you have somebody, a partner, and you up that way and you hold it, static holds. That's a really great way to get that trigger point. Then you slowly lower it. You can't get trigger points to build muscle unless you reach that point. And you do it at the intervals gym. It takes about 3 or 4 minutes of intense to failure exercise on our body group to reach those triggers. Now, if you reach those triggers, it does a couple other really important things, because you're also stressing bone. And when you stress bone, osteocalcin gets released, which is used all over the bodies, from the reproductive organs to the hippocampus and the brain, to regulate function. So exercise is not just to build muscles, it's to release all these other very important reactive hormones to keep you healthy. Like I said, I'm lucky I have someone that knows this in my life, and she's brilliant. It's funny to have the gym because she also says, no more. So yeah, I think it's essential to have exercise in this, because you have to be able to walk around. If you have sarcopenia and osteopenia and you can't get around in a walker, or you're in a nursing home, you may have a brain, but you have no way of walking around. Yeah, if you want to avoid those things, you better start exercising.
Yeah, I think there's more and more appreciation for the value of having muscle and strength as we age. It used to be, you probably remember with the Cooper Clinic, everybody was talking about aerobics for years, and then we finally discovered that, hey, it makes sense to have a little muscle on us. And I think even beyond that, what I like to focus on at this point I'm only 57, so I've got hopefully a lot of years left in me, but a lot of jumping and sprinting and being able to do that, because I think that becomes also important, particularly for just injury avoidance. You can get injured doing this stuff, but if you don't do this stuff, your tissues start to fall apart, and then you have very little capacity to do things.
Well, let me give you that good example. Yesterday, I was at the beach and I was getting a 5-gallon jug of water after I had just donated blood the previous day. Bad move. Didn't respect the chair, so to speak. And I was carelessly fell and dropped and had to roll on the concrete. And the only thing I had was just, I got a little nick there. But the point is, I've rolled on my hip and stuff, and there's no hip pain now because I had muscle. If you don't have muscle, you can't protect yourself from injury when you fall or get jostled around.
Yeah, I don't know how old you are. How much? 73? Yeah. Yeah. In many people, that type of fall would have resulted in a broken wrist, maybe a broken hip, maybe a broken proximal humor. I just saw it all the time as an orthopedic surgeon. These little minor falls are catastrophes. Yeah. And they are life-altering events. When you break a hip or something else, it almost always, I don't care how good we are at fixing it, almost always results in some decline in function to some degree. And that is, like you mentioned, you can't keep your brain and your heart and lungs going if the chassis on your machine is broken. So that's important to take care of that stuff. Let's talk about, because you mentioned fat, and I do agree that is an important fuel substance for us. And that's basically what I run on outside of whatever glucose my body makes. But What about protein? What are your thoughts on protein? I know there's a lot of disagreement on protein. Is protein bad? We don't eat enough protein. Very good. Where do you fall in the protein sort of spectrum?
You gotta have red meat. You got to have red meat for the leucine. Without leucine, you get no muscle turnover. End the story on that. If you cut the fat away from your meat, to just eat the red meat, I think I sent you a study that showed that people that just eat meat, okay, it's inflammatory to them, but based on their BMI. So then, if they're too fat, it's inflammatory. Interesting tidbit. I also think that meat has going on meat, actually all meat. It's one of the things I like to blast to the system. Grass-fed, finished hamburger. It's got about a 15% fat ratio. But if you are cutting the fat away, because you have some idea that maybe the animal was fed in a CAF or a lot and so forth, and don't want the grain lipids in it and stuff, you got to add back butter. Butter is basically concentrated stearic and palmitic acids, which are long-chain saturated fatty acids. And the reason we have to be careful about fats, I'm sure you probably realize, is the polyunsaturated fats, 3 and 6, are bent at the carbon 3 or the carbon 6, and they make bent up cell membranes instead of membranes like this. And that's the bigger issue, because if you have membranes that hold in the protons in the mitochondria, for instance, you make it the gradient to drive the wheel will make the ATP with phosphates and the ADP. So yeah, I think that the whole idea of proteins has to be based on these specific amino acids, and most of the plant-based diets just don't provide it. Now, I got this interesting study once I shared with Joe to say, what if we just add all these different nuts together for their amino acid content and see if we can come close to this stuff in meat? And you could, but the omega-6 was like 60,000 milligrams in 100 grams. It was ridiculous. So that thing's a bigger issue. Natural food, including meat, comes with very little amount of omega-6, which is converted into AA in the cells to make cell membranes. Smart enough? Perfect. No problem. We ate that for millions of years, no issue. Right now, it's sold in grocery stores as canola oil, corn oil, safflower oil, cottonseed oil, all these concentrated seed oils, and those go right into the cell, and they really start gumming up the works. The problem is with the fats is the source of the fats. For instance, if you want to have some fats from nuts, eat a few nuts. I also suggest get them out of the shell, because if you have a big bag of already shelled nuts, you can eat too much of it. Nature provides the method to control the things that might make a carnivore diet less boring, because it can be to some degree. You have to bring them down to, I like your meat chips idea. I saw that on one of your YouTube things. That's a great idea. But the thing is, though, you got to really control it, because out in nature, we ate the scraps from big predator kills, bone marrow and meat scraps to grow the brains. You probably also went around and found some carbohydrates, some sugars in maybe some fresh berries, some fresh tree fruits, some honey, but it was protected by bees. You didn't get a lot of that. But nature controls the amount of sugars you can really find or you can get a hold of. Modern society doesn't do that. It provides so many, it just causes so many dysfunctional metabolic problems and disease, that there's a huge healthcare industry that's developed basically by these bad foods after we introduced like Crisco around 1900 and all the others after that. So yeah, fats are important. Protein is super important for the specific amino acids to grow muscle and maintain muscle turnover, keep your muscle that you built stable. And plants just don't have it. And not to mention the lectins and some of the polyphenols and all that other stuff that come with plants, because plants are trying to stay alive too. And they're putting all these weird chemicals in their mix so that they can reach the point of making seeds to reproduce to keep the insects off of them, because they can't run away. You have to stay in play. So there's a real issue with the safety of plant-based foods and the lack of proteins in these foods to be able to grow our bodies.
Yeah, I've seen they've got some plant-based isolates where they can take the amino acids and put more leucine in there, and they can get equivalent muscle protein synthesis as meat. But again, that's requiring a tremendous amount of processing, and it changes the absorption characteristics so far from what it would have been, you said, as a natural product. And I know there's people that are saying it doesn't matter what no other animal on the planet is subjected to such a ultra processed diet as we are. And I think we pay the results, we pay the price of that. One of the other components, which is quite interesting that you find almost pretty much exclusively in meat, is carnosine, which has been shown to have some incredible anti-glycating properties, and it's been attributed to significant protection of brain aging and things like that. Because as someone who promotes meat, I look at all these various compounds, whether it's carnosine, carnitine, creatine, anserine, all these different taurines and all these products that are in there. And based on the work of guys like Stefan Van Vliet and Fred Provenza, we know that meat has something like 70,000 individual nutritional compounds, and most of which we don't have a clue what they do yet. But what are your thoughts on some of these other compounds outside of this macro, fat, protein, and carbohydrates? What are your thoughts on some of these other things?
They control very important processes like glycosylated end products. You want to be able to stop the synthesis of sugars and proteins because these can't be eliminated. We thought they may be eliminated at the end of the dry fast because of the stuff that comes out afterwards. It's there's also very orange colored, like rusty colored. So we don't even know at this point if some of the excess rust or iron's coming out. Currently, the only way to control that is by blood donation, so that you can call on erythropoietin to go in there and grab some iron to make new blood cells. Mostly, it's just accumulated. So the stuff in meat, I think it's like any product. Here's another good example. They refined TA65 from astragalus root. It didn't work. But astragalus root does, because there's other factors and compounds in these naturally occurring things that are below on Earth, but have all the functions in them already. Meat is one of those. Like I said, I am not hot on the fake food diets because they incorporate a lot of these polyunsaturated fatty oils and all this weird stuff to try and imitate, or you can just run by a store or find a butcher to make anyway. I just don't see the logic in it. If it's just for commerce, that could be the only reason. But as far as health goes, it's contrary. It's a contradiction to what health is.
How did you get into this space? Because I know you said working with the NASA medical program into, hey, I'm going to do something else. What drove you in this direction, just out of curiosity?
I was into longevity and always been into caffeine, Mr. Juice Man, and all that stuff early on. Everybody tries every possible way to improve their health. But after I found out there was actually no possibility of them going to Mars, I just dropped that hot potato and went off into medical science again and biological, chemical metabolism stuff inside of human beings, which luckily I found dry fasting. And the why I call that luckily is dry fasting can do all this stuff, and I had lost my sense of smell from being exposed to the solids in that hot blue PVC pipe blue in a poorly ventilated area. Lost my sense of smell. Couldn't smell a thing. Food tasted terrible because smell and taste are completely interlinked. And I went to doctors for 3 years and did all this stuff and salt rinses and all this stuff. And then my partner's sister actually found out about the work of Dr. Filanov and Dr. Shishnikov in Russia on dry fasting. And I said, what have I got to lose? So I went into a 7-day hard dry fast. That's no showers, no brushing your teeth and spitting out, none of that stuff. Nothing goes down the gullet, nothing goes on the body. And in 3 days, my sense of smell came back as my stem cells were being released to repair neural damage, and a bunch of other things were repaired at the same time. And I thought, ooh, dear, there's something to this. And that got me down this pathway. And then naturally, to understand why it was doing this, I had to understand all the biochemistry of why it was doing this and what the likely agents and reactions were that produced these benefits. And that got me into it. I've always been into interesting issues. One of the things, I was into agriculture for a while because I was able to figure out how to get all the minerals out of ocean water and fraction away the cells so you could put it on crops to really grow the microorganisms that need these minerals, not just the plants that grow by the organisms eating these minerals. And the salt, which would kill the microorganisms, like when you gargle with salt water to kill an infection in your throat, wasn't applied. So it grew plants really fast. That technology was picked up by a foreign investor, and I sold it a few years ago. But what it was all about was figuring out how to get the nutrients back in the food. If you look at an apple compared to apples now, it took one apple to get about 4.3 milligrams of iron. It now takes 27 apples to get that amount. It's ridiculous. The depletion of the cell is so bad, it's critical. And this brings up another issue. Why do I like beef liver? Because we've strip mined the minerals out of the soil so much over the last 100 years, so the food is empty. You have to feed animals like cows and dairy cows especially, selenium, copper, and zinc, and all these chemicals that aren't in the silage because you can't go out into the silage because it's no longer in the croplands. What's the best method? Animal protein. It's an animal beef liver because it has the highest copper amount, which is interesting because in the body of an animal, it is the proteins you need, the zinc you need, the beta you need, all the amino you need, all the beef liver. It's just always things you need for longevity and health or in animal proteins. I started looking at all the anthropological evidence that this is what we were eating to actually get to where we are. That was another big piece of the puzzle as well as far as the food is concerned. Because the biggest issue with food is, are you keeping tight junctions in the epithelial area of the gastric tract? Because if you don't, stuff can leak out a cell day away, and in 20 seconds can reach anywhere in the body because your blood's circulated 3 times every minute. Food affects the integrity and the tightness of the junctions in the intestines. And it also provides the nutrients to control the iron, control the copper, control all this other stuff. But by reality, it turns out the best food to do that is animal proteins. We don't graze for a reason. The apes had this huge intestines with this, it's called senescence, which is a variation of fermenting ability inside their digestive system. And that's why they forage for 12 to 14 hours a day to eat tons and tons of food because that's where they get all the proteins and all the other stuff in that fermented thing going on. But we don't. We have an appendix as a remnant of that. And we have a very strong acid digestive system, which requires salt. With your salt is a very common motto that people have heard, well, it's because you need salt for the chlorine to make hydrochloric acid. Without hydrochloric acid in the stomach, you can't dissolve your food. And if you end up sending undissolved food down into the intestines, then you get small intestinal bacterial overload and sebum, all the stuff. As the stuff comes out, you look at your heart and then heartburn. That's not how they're all. It's this weird chemistry happening because you don't have enough stomach acids. And I think salt's probably also important for carnivore diets because if you're not eating carbohydrates, you dump a lot of water, so you need a lot of salt. What's your thoughts on that?
Certainly initially, there's obviously fluid shifts that are occurring. It's often secondary to lower insulin levels, which insulin causes the kidney to hang on to sodium, and then water tends to follow that. So, yeah, I do. And then, like I said, I personally, because I sweat a lot, I'm working out all the time. I lose a lot of sodium and stuff through my sweat, so I like to replace that. But let me ask you about this protocol, this Phoenix protocol, because it sounds like dry fasting combined with diet and a few other things. Is there does it vary or is it the same thing all the time? Obviously, you can't be fasting all the time. So how is it designed? In what way? Is it like somebody who's acutely ill will do this and then they go into some sort of maintenance mode, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think that's important to bring up. Dry fasting, because it's an extreme hormetic stress. It's a stress that you go into deliberately to succeed over. And it makes you stronger afterwards. It really does. You can't be ill all the time for 2 reasons. It's an intense stress to all the cells in your body for a week. And it also helps your stem cell population. You don't want to be doing that all the time. You need stem cells to repair big damage if it does happen. A calculated period of dry fasting to regenerate stem cells to deal with the attrition rate of the somatic cells, that's a great method. Okay. But as far as dry fasting all the time, no. I tell everybody on my YouTube channel that asked about this, and it says no. Under extreme cases, like maybe extreme obesity, you might go into a series of 5 day and then 5 eating and 5 day and 5 eating. But by the same token, it's a matter of if you're impatient or not. If you're patient, you can just use the random cycle to dump a pound every 2 or 3 days if you just don't eat 1 out of 3. And that doesn't take you into starvation mode. It doesn't do this other stuff. And dry fasting is a very serious medical intervention to intractable diseases that are not solved any other way. And the most is long for already stage cancers to the things this repairs. It eliminates a lot of the toxins that cause the irritants that cause a lot of diseases. And it also has really, I think, a lot of PUFAs that are causing a lot of problems as well. Yeah, it's something you don't want to do all the time. It's just one tool in a toolbox. It's a very sharp tool. You want to be very careful handling it.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, like you said, I've seen, and you may be familiar with the work of guys like Dr. Jason Fung, who's been a proponent of fasting. I don't believe it was dry fasting, but he is obviously pushed that quite a bit over the years. Is there a place where water fasting is okay, but dry fasting would be more beneficial, or do you think water fasting is a waste of time?
I think water fasting is a waste of time for one reason. The people that always water fast lose muscle mass and then gain back fat. So then that BMI completely gets out of shape over time. Because if you don't have the ability to tap your fat cells effectively to provide the glucose, the glycerol, and the free fatty acids, you're going to turn to gluconeogenesis to provide plasma glucose. And that's why muscle loss happens on water fast, if not on dry fast, because growth hormones excreted or secreted by the pituitary specifically to protect that. And the PKA system is also specifically in place to protect that. So you don't get the muscle loss. So these people, I remember telling Milo had some proponent on his show that it was like he's 350 pounds and he's a big water fast guy and writing books on water fast. The reason he's big is because water fasting dissolves muscle tissue, and when you eat, you just start packing fat. Because I know it's hard to make muscle. You really have to work at it to grow some muscle tissue, but you can lose a lot of it on water fasting. So I don't recommend it to anybody.
Do you know, because you made the statement that dry fasting preserves, have there been studies that have looked at this where they've actually dry fasted? Because it seems, particularly these days, it might even be considered unethical to do, particularly long ones. Do we have some research where we can say, hey, this has been done and we've shown through DEXA or whatever method to show that we don't lose muscle?
Yeah, I'm writing a new book that has a lot of all these techniques thrown together as an organized regime for a longer lifespan. I think I have a pretty good philosophy about this at this point, and it's probably going to be done this week. I list a lot of those articles on those particular results in this book on purpose, because those are the questions. You have to know, you can make these statements, but outrageous claims require outrageous proof, right? And that's where we're going. When I read this stuff, I read all these papers and all these studies and this research, and yes, I said, I'm sure you'd really love to see some of these things because they have a lot to do with what we're doing. One of the things that was discovered by Molly Robbins was that it was another researcher in this iron issue, is that the balance of iron and copper in the bone marrow determines whether the bone bone or blood cells. And if it's way off, things don't work correctly. So again, we have a situation where I have a couple of different interesting techniques. The Carnivore diet, pre-99 homeostasis, it knocks you right back to normal. It's a baseline. Dry fasting in a week, you learn about the problems that have caused a lot of the interruption in homeostasis. And I've read your stuff on your site, and people on my site say the same, that I've saved their life and I've done this stuff and all these things that have been cured. No, I hadn't done anything. I've just shown them a way to get it done themselves, because these are all just evolutionarily developed techniques that we've fought hard for, that we have in ourselves. We just don't use them properly because, unfortunately, we're born without a user manual. Yeah.
So you've been obviously doing this for a period of time, maybe many years now. Is there how often are you doing these dry fast things? Is this something you do once a quarter, once a month, or how do you do that?
Yeah. When I first started, it was back in 2019, which was my first 107-day dry fast, which solved all these neurological issues and the epithelium inside my nasal cavity. And then I said, wow, this may really work. Let's do it again. Let's fail 5-6 months. I did it again. And then I started thinking about it seriously. And I thought, you know what? The first dry fast got rid of all this debris, all this weird orange and brown stuff came out, and that was a huge amount. The second dry fast didn't make that much, which makes me think, okay, maybe what I eliminated was decades of undigestible cellular waste that I was finally able to get rid of when I could open the gates. And then you just don't make that much. And then if you don't make that much, then you're not really trying to get rid of toxins. You're just using it for stem cell regeneration. So I backed off to once a year. These days, I do a 5 or a 7-day once a year. I don't do it during the year. I don't do it for short dry fast. A lot of people tell me that's what they like to do and so forth. I say, please keep it into a few days so you don't turn your stem cells on. But that's my program. It's once a year, a dry fast for 5 to 7 days. All year long, I eat red meat and beef liver to control the iron and the copper balances. So these are kind of the regimes I think that are going to, if we keep up with it, we can have a significantly longer lifespan. And when you double from 40 to 80, maybe we can double it again from 80 to 160 or somewhere in that range. just by proper management of these already existing life-excelling systems that we just don't manage properly.
Okay, fair enough. And obviously, if you're doing this for a week, a year, or 5 days a year, you've got another 360 days to account for. So how do you, because obviously not poisoning ourselves obviates some of the need for the detox, if you will. How do you avoid the damage, the ongoing damage? Obviously, like I tell people, stop treating your body like a garbage can, but what are you doing specifically throughout the rest of the year?
Yeah, I live life. I do that once a year because I know that gets rid of a lot of issues that would end up over time becoming the diseases of aging. Okay. During the year, I exercise. I do 3 days a week of lifting. I walk at the beach. A lot of my videos are from the beach during my morning beach walks on my YouTube channel. And I get out and do stuff. I walk around and jump around. I do full contact gardening, and just feel life like something it's felt like it was when I was a kid. I eat right. I don't eat junk food. I don't eat it at fast food restaurants. I barely eat at most restaurants, in fact, because I just don't know what kind of oils they're using to cook their food in. So you have to avoid that. You have to avoid basically anything that comes in a bag in a grocery store. Okay, that's probably a first good move. Anything that comes in a bottle at the grocery store as a cooking oil is a good thing to avoid. And I limit the damage I do every now and then. Sure, I'll have a beer. Sure, I'll have a martini or something. But it's not a daily thing. It's not even a monthly thing. It's understanding that alcohol is a serious toxin. The benefits of stress relief and a little full healthiness are okay for a little bit, but you can't do it all the time or just eat your body up. So I just essentially exercise, eat right, throw these things in it, and I'm particularly interested in the things I eat to keep the antioxidation processes working in me. And I do blood donation. And I do blood donation 3 times a year now. I'm thinking about doing it 6 times. But I do it every 3 months. And that allows me to scratch out some of that stored iron and improve my copper to iron balance. So I have more copper than iron happening in the body. And that's the regime. It's not anything special. It's just managing how you live life normally without being seduced into the idea that some of these things are safe to eat. They're really not.
So obviously there's critics of extended dry fasting. It's dangerous. You're going to whatever. Are there people that this is not appropriate for? Are there situations where proceed with caution might be out there? Maybe a diabetic that has got poorly controlled blood glucose and maybe they become very hypoglycemic. Do you have any people that you'd say, hey, proceed with caution on this stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. For instance, we can't possibly solve varicose veins. Varicose veins, it turns out, is a mitochondrial issue, which is causing a lack of energy and the destruction of the DNA in the mitochondria and part of the cells of the veins, the venous system, to work and not operate correctly because of this. Again, I think it's this interruption of copper and iron balancing. Yeah, it's extremely overweight people have to be careful. Diabetics have to be careful. People with heart problems should probably be careful. I suggest that if they want to do a dry fast, take my book to their doctor and talk about it with their doctor, with their physician, to see if the physician sees there's something he wants to get into with their patient, because it is something that needs to be monitored. Anything over 5 or 7 days needs to be monitored by somebody. And the Russians do 11-day dry fast, hard dry fast, which cures all these cancers and all this stuff. But if you're not treating a illness, you don't want to lose a treatment all the time. Yeah, you have to worry about if you're too skinny because you need fat to process to run the mechanism of the dry fast. If you're too overweight, sure, you need to do something else first to get rid of the fat. Yeah, the nice system, but 85% of the people that ignore most of that and just do it anyway haven't had much of a problem. I haven't had anybody so far on my 5 years of operating a channel on this talk about any problems they've had except for some headaches and not being able to sleep because your circadian rhythms get so messed up. But that's solved by a big rain fan and white noise to let you sleep. It's simple solutions to that. But yeah, like I say, it's not a panacea for everything. Nothing is.
There is a, as you probably are familiar, there's a, I'm going to call it situation. There's the concept of a refeeding syndrome where people can get very sick when they break a fast. They have very dramatic magnesium and other electrolyte swings. How do we go? Is that something we typically see after a 5 to 7 day dry fast? I think maybe it's a longer fast that might induce that, but how do you come out of the fast? And I guess that's an important question.
Once you run a refeeding, because both the Russian doctors say it's more important how do you come out of it than how you go into it. You've already used up tons of magnesium and potassium and phosphorus and other stuff during your dry fast to operate all the systems and stay alive during a dry fast. You got to replenish that. A lot of people have tried like protein smoothies and stuff, but you got to remember that your body has a whole new layer of brand new baby cells that line the whole GI tract. You got to introduce food slowly to that. And you got to bring back your electrolytes first, especially sodium to prevent edema. So you can open up the aquaporins on the cells to get the water back into the cells. So it's not just flooding the extracellular matrix and causing edema. You got to have potassium and magnesium, especially because you've been using magnesium to get the ATP out of the mitochondria to use it in your body. So you got to replenish that. So yeah, the whole thing with the Phoenix protocol dry fast method is a refeeding syndrome, a refeeding regime that prevents the refeeding syndromes of eating too much food and all that kind of stuff. You exit gently. Coconut water is my favorite because that tastes good after 5 or 7 days. But yeah, and you just bring in potassium, bring in the sodium, bring in magnesium, bring in your critical electrolytes, take a multi-mineral electrolyte drink or solution or something like Tangy Tangerine from Longevity or Youngevity from Joel Wallet stuff, and do it slowly. Then bring in some bone broths and do it slowly. And then when you feel like it, some easy to digest food, like maybe some eggs or a hamburger or something like that. But the first day, you're just trying to gently reestablish digestive function. And the best way to do it was electrolyte drinks and some bone broth.
Yeah, I guess what not to do would be eat something very high sugary, insulin producing, because you get this dramatic. I think that's what triggers some of the refeeding syndrome. So you would avoid that, correct?
Yeah, precisely. No, it's a pretty easy process. Again, people have a big barrier to even attempt it, and they do it several. That was easy. Yeah, not eating and not doing it's pretty easy. You do it every night. You don't eat it while you sleep. But when you extend the sleep metabolism, and especially autophagy over that time period, you can get into really aggressive autophagy to start dissolving these forever chemicals, for instance, with the peroxisomes and all the other stuff that only happens for a little bit right at the end of sleep because you never get into chaperone-mediated autophagy long enough before you wake up. But if you go into a dry fast, you're in that phase in 5 or 7 days. So yeah, you can get rid of a lot of really difficult to digest and degrade chemicals with this method as well.
You'd mentioned it's probably not wise to engage in intense exercise while you're doing this dry fast, but is it important just not to be sedentary? Like you said, walking, is walking beneficial to do during this time then?
Absolutely, because thinking about what's happening, if what we think is happening, and it seems to be the case, if your cells are dumping out tons and tons of toxins, they're dumping it into the extracellular matrix. The extracellular matrix goes into the lymphatic system, and the lymphatic system doesn't have a pump. Only motion is its pump. So you've got to be active. You've got to stretch. You've got to walk around. You've got to maybe do some squats, just your body weight a couple times, just to flex the lymphatic system to get it flowing out of the lymphatic system or the extracellular matrix into the lymphatic and into the bowel to get rid of the stuff for dry fast. And that's absolutely incredible. You have to exercise. You have to move around. You can't just sit there and basically cook in a first sea of toxins that have been released from your cells.
Fair enough. We unfortunately are out of time. This has been fascinating. Can you share with us any social media? I know you have a YouTube channel, name of the book or anything that you have, just so people that are interested can look you up or find that information.
Yeah, you can find my videos on dry fasting at the Phoenix Protocol on YouTube. You can go to our website, which is www.cytolyfe.com. That gets into what we're doing. Basically, we're just trying to get the message out. I've turned off all of my ads because I don't want to interrupt the message, because I don't care about a few pennies to take a message and interrupt it. So I don't do those things. And I give you a straight shot of ideas and techniques and protocols and habits that you have on this protocol, the Phoenix protocol. And it helps people to understand and be more confident about attempting it themselves. If they have questions, my personal email is in the back of the fourth book, the Phoenix protocol. You can get hold of me that way. It's available on Amazon, and it's just a cool to read. It's detailed enough that I feel a physician's going to understand that I'm onto something, but not so detailed that a common reader just can't grasp it and say, "Oh, I can do this. This is easy." Because I think as your average, we have to decipher a lot of the stuff we have the sources and the things that we can share with people that might not have the background to be able to really grasp a lot of this stuff.
All right. Very good, Dr. Dunning. Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it. We'll see. Hopefully this has got some good information people can use. Thank you.